Florida, multiple things in mind. You ready? Okay, welcome back to the Adam Hancock Podcast. This is episode number 4. And today what I'm going to do is I have 4 or 5 things that are more like kind of interesting, just stuff that's been relevant in the last couple of weeks, dealing with clients or conversations, this kind of thing. I just want to kind of broach and bring up and want to just kind of chat about them and ramble a little bit here. So we're just going to get rolling. So number 1, moving to Florida with multiple things in mind. So the scenario kind of preface-wise, foundationally, is you want to move to Florida, but it's not just like I'm going to buy a single-family house, and it's just not as simple. So moving to Florida, say you have a 1031 exchange, a few $1 million in it, you have commercial property where you live currently, and you're going to relocate that money potentially, and then you also want to relocate and live by that money. So that would be maybe a single family in addition to that, and then maybe it's like you have an interim period, so like maybe you want to build, right? So the idea of like, okay, multiple transactions, how to go about it logistically and that kind of thing. So I think there's some things to think about here is first off of the town. So if you are relocating a commercial property that, especially if it's like in above a 4-unit place, like a 16-plex or a 20 or whatever, then there's definitely some cities in Florida that have advantages versus others. Like a Tampa versus a Sarasota, or a Miami or Jacksonville. Like these bigger metros are going to have a lot more like apartment living housing, and they're going to have a lot of these multi-unit things. That's something to think about. And then do you like the single family versions that you would live in as a homestead in those cities? I think that's note number 1. Number 2 is what I think is interesting is the actual search for these units. Is that it's like MLS is very simple, right? Zillow and all these for residential property, especially under 4 units that would be considered residential. But when you get into commercial, like the way to actually search these things out beyond like broker to broker relationships is a little tricky in Florida, in my opinion. Like I've been talking to people and they're saying like MLS is extremely involved in the commercial property and I'm talking like not duplexes and 3plexes and that kind of thing, but I'm talking like large apartment buildings. That MLS is a very good resource for that. Where in Florida, I completely disagree with that. It's more like commercial websites. Like can't think of the one at the moment, but the basically Zillow of commercial property so it's more like consumer to representing broker versus like kind of like middleman realtor in between. Just because like it's kind of like rentals down in Florida. Like it's almost like the consumer can search it very similar to how the client can search it. It's just the fiduciary assistance and the vetting out of other things that would be helpful versus just finding the property. So that's something that's interesting as well, and especially in MLS, I think it's extremely limited because the evolution of how MLS exists it was valuable back in the day because like actually like people couldn't see properties themselves. They didn't have a Zillow or anything like that. But now that there's a user interface that's attractive and arguably way more effective than an individual MLS. Like these MLSs are kind of antiquated because they're only specific territories. So like I can't even look at property for sale in Miami on my own MLS in this area, and we have the biggest one in Florida. So I think just the search itself becomes a little clunkier than people would imagine based on where they're coming from. And then like just evolution of logistics to kind of round this one out. So I think, kind of the approach could be like, okay, I want to buy some commercial property here, and I want a 1031 exchange, right? So the 1031 has a deadline, but it's not terrible. I mean, you got to identify it in 45 days, transact it in 6 months, but it has a deadline. So what you could do is you could do a couple things, right? So you could do, I'm going to buy a single-family residence, and that single-family residence, another thing is it doesn't have to be by where you're buying the commercial property. It could be close. If you kind of want to manage it like that, but you don't have to be in the same area. You can like do Lakewood Ranch with your single family and then buy commercial in Riverview or something like that. But you could buy a single family home as a resale, be in there in 40 days or less, and then you can say, I'm getting more familiar with the area and see like Section 8 areas versus beach rentals versus these areas, and maybe transact after you buy the single family. So you maybe do it in that order. Or you could say like, okay, I'm going to build, or I don't want to like really rush this thing. So instead of buying that single family primary homestead, maybe you buy a flip house of like, there's a surprising many houses under $300. So maybe, or $300,000. So maybe you do you do an interim option that's instead of a rental, because the rentals aren't super attractive now to rent yourself. So maybe you do that. And I'm gonna buy a flip home, live in it while we flip it, then I'm going to transact as a single family residence and then buy commercial, or somewhere in between, right? So I wanted to I thought it was interesting. I have a client working through that. So there's a lot of things that are going on there, but I think you got to kind of be aware of all of it at the same time, or if you make the wrong move first, it could pin you back into a corner you don't want to live in. So that's number one on this list. Number two, I've been talking a lot about is luxury in the suburbs. So luxury in the suburbs, basically that you have all these best ways to live in a city, but if you're looking for like places in cities that look like nothing else, like the Lake Club in Sarasota or the Oaks in Nokomis or something like this, then I think it becomes quite narrow about how to transact that. So this would be like $1.5 million or under in a suburban area. So when you get to that, you really are like maybe 1 to 3 total communities that compare to each other. It's not like there's 50. So like if your number one doesn't work out logistically because like you can't build there anymore, or you don't like any of the resales currently, you don't have 50 other options to go. It really is like different parts of town and that kind of thing. So I think what I've been seeing a lot in that realm is basically like you got to know. Basically, one, you have to get really deep in with the custom builders, right? So whether that's through someone like me or independently or whatever, is that these guys own lots that are placed in all these different parts of town. So you can't just roll into a neighborhood and say, like, I want to look at the models. Like, it's more about what the lots are. And what I find a lot of times, and a lot of clients that I have that have opportunity are like, the lots they're not anywhere. Like, the builder might own them, and it's like, I know that they're gonna maybe release them in 3 or 4 months, but it's not like the current new construction market. So it's really getting engaged with the builder first, and then saying, where could I do what you're describing? And then how much cheaper is it in this area versus this area? And then also understanding, like, if I like this one specific neighborhood that looks like nothing else in town, then where else in the vicinity of Southwest Florida could I do that? So I think the luxury housing in the suburbs is interesting because there's just like at every master plan community, there's like a top. And there's only a few communities that sit at that top, and they're so different. Like whether they're high fees and stuff you don't value, or they're golf and you don't value that, or something like that. It's just a short decision. So like it's a lot of people's criteria has 3 to 4 options within that criteria. So you got some backup plans, and then you can pick based on style. But I think luxury in the suburbs, it's more like if your number one doesn't work out, a lot of people are like, so I have no idea what I would do from here. So I would say that I think that topic's been really interesting. It's been hot on my mind. I've been finding a lot of sleeper opportunities and communities that like the Founders Club in Sarasota is a great example. Communities that at one point in time had value that was like weird. Like, so I grew up in this area, and then everybody was like this, they're building these mega mansions out way east of Fruitville, way east out in town, right? And then all of a sudden, Lakewood Ranch is built all the way around this community, right? And then now people are viewing Lower Lakewood Ranch as a really attractive location because of what it is for the area. And then the Founders Club community that already existed that whole time sits right here. It's not part of the community, and people aren't aware of it that aren't from here, or don't have that level of context for that price range. But now it's like a gem, where it was not a gem, I wouldn't say. Even 5 years ago, it's different. So now it like really rises to the top. So you have like some sleeper community opportunities that if you didn't have that level of context would be hard to know. And then I think the custom building thing is really interesting. And then you could go really high end at a community like a Taylor Morrison, where you would do like a 1.2 million in an existing community. If you don't really, like, 'cause a lot of people that build custom, like they don't go as custom as you would think. They're really looking for a guide. So they do pick some sort of template model, and then they massage it, and it lets you do a little bit more, obviously. But you might be someone that thinks you want custom that doesn't need it necessarily. So luxury in the suburbs has been interesting to me, and anyone that's kind of working through that, I think, would find that relevant. A little niche, but it's relevant. Number 3 is, so I made a video a week ago, and it is doing really well on YouTube, but it's about best beaches in Florida. But I like tilted it, and I said, I wanted to be quaint beach towns, and I really did focus on the Gulf Coast. One, I live most of my life on the Gulf Coast, but I just like a lot of the little beaches around the area of Sarasota. And people are like, oh, you don't talk about the Atlantic coast enough. You don't talk about the Panhandle and that kind of thing. So just for you guys, I'm going to throw you a bone, and I'm going to talk about that. So I don't only love the Gulf Coast of Florida. I've lived in 9 cities in Florida. I lived 5 years in Pensacola. I lived in West Palm, Miami, Naples, all of those places. So I don't dislike those beaches, but when you have a list of 5 places, obviously can't talk about them all. So I talked about what are near and dear to my heart, but I'm going to rattle off some just for you guys. Destin and Gulf Breeze 1. So I'm going to go all the way to the Panhandle. So I lived in Gulf Breeze mostly through college. My wife went to high school there. Love that town. Gulf Breeze is unique in that Pensacola Beach, actually you go through Gulf Breeze to get to, so it creates a little kind of town that's really close to the beach, really safe, nice. Destin's a really great destination. It gets you pretty far over, so that's Gulf Breeze is damn near Alabama, so something to think about. But I'm going to throw you Naples people, Sanibel and Captiva, pastel shells, cool islands, a lot of beaches over in that area I think are cool. So that gives you that's a Gulf Coast, but it's cool. So also, Miami is interesting because Miami has, again, it's like a mini Manhattan. It has a lot of stuff going on there, but Miami has a bunch of beaches, very different from each other. Really different vibe, that kind of characteristic. Like a lot of people just classify Miami as like one thing, but that would give you the cool thing that I think there is like the Atlantic and the Biscayne Bay and the kind of merge there creates like a really aqua blue water. Let's see. You have the Keys. You have Amelia Island. I have a video coming out soon that's going to talk about Nocatee, which is the Jacksonville suburbs. So that's cool. You have Panama City. But anyway, so I'm just doing it because people are giving me a hassle, and I hope that helps. Okay, so number 4. So I have something I'm really excited about. I haven't been excited about something like this in a while, so I have a new thing that's coming out. It's going to be, probably won't seriously get into promoting it for a couple weeks, but it's related to condominiums, and I think it's going to solve a problem that I think is hard to solve. So I think it has all the markers of I don't know if there's a great guide in my opinion if you're really trying to figure something out. There's not a great thing I think that exists out there that provides a comprehensive resource to do that. So be on the lookout for that. I'm gonna talk about that some more. It'll make a lot of sense here. It'll probably be 2 or 3 weeks before I get super deep into it, but I'm really excited about it. I hope you guys will find it value. It'll be very different than this current channel. So I wanted to mention that. And then the last thing I want to talk about in this podcast, episode number 4, is rental, vacancy, and investment. So one thing that's becoming interesting is that, kind of like in strife, creates opportunity. So the idea that anyone that's searching for a rental right now in the area, especially single family, extremely hard to find, especially if you have like a pet or something like that. It's just tough, and I have so many people that build new construction that, that creates like an interim period, and we've talked about that a lot. But what I think one thing that's really interesting is that is buying property opportunistically for serving the rental need purpose. So that scarcity of rental, if you can acquire property to rent. Now, again, it's the same buying market, right? So it's tough either way. But I've seen I've been working on that personally as well. That's a lot of my money goes to that same type of stuff, as I love the single family rental model. But there's something to really think about. It's a very interesting topic of saying okay, you could say well, it sucks. The rental market's shitty. I can't do anything. But there's a certain level of people that are doing the opposite and saying, what's going to come down the pipe that's going to provide opportunity that I can buy these homes because of all the demand. The demand is very clear of who needs to rent, and a lot of what's creating the buying market is creating the rental market. So I think, I love the idea of tilting, just that's kind of a launch pad for just tilting the perspective of, again, during weird, rough times, I think there is some stuff that emerges that does create opportunity for a good portion of the public that has the liquidity and just, the timing works out right. So that is what has been hot on my mind this week. I hope that you guys found that interesting. I hope you found that valuable. Be on the lookout. On Sunday of this week, we're going to have a video that comes out that I think is pretty cool, a little different. And please subscribe if you're enjoying this stuff. Please check out, I'll put some other the past podcasts down here. My information will be below as well. Let me know if you need anything at all, and we'll see you guys in the next one.